Good evening, and welcome to the John F. Kennedy Jr. Forum at the Institute of Politics. My name is Hadley Harvey. I'm a first year studying government and economics, and I am a member of the JFK Jr. Forum Committee. Before we begin, please note the exit doors, which are located at both the Park Street side and the JFK Street side. In the event of an emergency, walk to the exit closest to you and congregate in the JFK Park. Please take a moment to also silence your phones. Finally, join me in welcoming the Governor of the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, Governor Maura Healey.
Thank you so much, Hadley, for that introduction and welcome. I asked where Hadley was from. She's from Iowa. Yeah, from all over. People come from all over to Harvard University to study, to learn, to research. We love Harvard University and the Kennedy School and the JFK Forum and the Institute of Politics. 1,000 years ago, I lived in Kirkland House right across the street, and as a government concentrator, used to come to IOP events. So it's wonderful to be back here with you. Dean Weinstein, thank you to you and the team for hosting this forum and for so many important convenings that you do. To my dear friend Beth Myers, it's wonderful to be with you and to know that you and Ned Price have taken the helm as co-directors at the IOP. Thank you as well to Aaron Goldman, director of the JFK Forum. We're going to hear shortly from Nancy Gibbs, who is going to do a wonderful job moderating. It's great to be with you and with all the faculty and students who are in attendance tonight. I also want to note my chief of staff. This is the hardest. Beth was chief of staff to Governor Mitt Romney, and Kate Cook is my chief of staff. It's the hardest job in the business, and God bless you for even showing up here tonight, Kate. I'm going to talk a little bit about Governor Cox and Congressman Auchincloss in just a moment, but it is special to have both of you here tonight in this room. I was saying to Governor Cox, you know, this is New England, you know? This is what happens. It snows and the Patriots are going to the Super Bowl. This is what we do. I'm grateful everybody's here and that you're having this conversation. It's an important conversation on a super important topic at this time. There's so much happening across the world. Some of it is chaotic, some of it is dangerous, some of it's frightening. There's a lot of uncertainty. And I think that it's especially important to not lose sight of this issue, social media and polarization, as we think about those other issues, because it is my personal view that social media is responsible for some of what we're seeing today, and social media is also responsible for exacerbating some of what we're experiencing today around the country, around the world. And social media, I've seen through my own lens as a politician, it makes it harder in many ways for us to come together and fix the problems, address the problems, have the conversations that really need addressing. Now, I also come to this not only as a governor who's interested in protecting her residents, but also as a citizen who cares about our country, the future of democracy, and the problem, the cancer, the toxicity of extreme polarization. And I also say it as someone with teenagers at home who sees the impact of social media on our young people. So this is a timely and necessary conversation. And it's also an opportunity to hear about it from, in my view, the two elected officials in the country who have done the most to call attention to this issue and to propose real solutions to address it. So we're in for a treat. Governor Cox, a great friend and a fellow governor. I saw him in his role as chair of the National Governors Association during my first year in office, and I saw how hard he worked to advance the cause of civility and bipartisan discourse. And, I believe, along with Governor Cox, that as governors, we can set a better tone for others. We do have to file budgets that actually work. I filed one today that are balanced, and we have to work through storms and disasters and all sorts of things together. And you'll hear from Governor Cox, and you'll see his tremendous model for leadership. His leadership initiative as chair of the NGA was Disagree Better. And we had a whole year of programming on how to have the kind of exchange where we may not see eye to eye, but we can talk through issues. And I think it's such an important effort that we need to continue on with in this country. I also want to thank him for making the special effort. We were all snowed out the other night, and nevertheless, he made his way here, and it's wonderful, wonderful to see him. I want to thank Congressman Auchincloss for his clarity of vision. When you think about a voice and a voice of reason out of Washington, so sorely needed, right? Just straight talk, common sense, ideas, real solutions, and not just rhetoric and platitudes. I think about Jake Auchincloss, and I think that his words, he's been giving us the actual words and concepts to not only help us understand what is bothering us so much about polarization and social media and what's happening, but also what's actually going on with these platforms, what they're doing, and the effect, particularly on our young people. His legislation is smart, it's well thought out, and it tackles the problem from multiple angles. So it's wonderful to see him as well. I'll just offer a couple of comments. Let me say this, okay? As governor of this great state of Massachusetts, I am a huge proponent of technology, of innovation. We are a knowledge-based economy, and I appreciate the role that technology has played in advancing the good of society. That extends to AI. It extends to social media. Okay? So don't get me wrong, I'm not dissing all of this by any stretch. And when I think about Massachusetts, where we brag about first, not only the first school, university, and library, we actually invented the first computer, in addition to inventing American democracy, born right here 250 years ago. I come to this also as somebody who is Attorney General, and probably my first encounter with social media was when we investigated Backpage for human trafficking. And we ran into this problem with the Communications Decency Act. And boy, we used to be able to go after people who trafficked others, through, back in those days, the newspaper. But as soon as you got to these digital platforms, it was complete absolution and immunity. And it was very, very frustrating to know that we couldn't break through and deal with this. I later led bipartisan investigations with other attorneys general around the nation into Meta, which was then Facebook, and other platforms, premised on the concerns that we had about what they were doing to young people in particular, their mental health, their well-being. And we also had concerns about what these platforms were doing to stifle competition when it bought up then rivals like Instagram and WhatsApp. We learned firsthand, what was happening with some of the algorithms and the addictive nature of all of this, and we tried to take action. But again, hard for states to act on their own in this space. It's why it's impressive to see what Governor Cox has done, but also why we really need leadership out of DC on this. Right now, as governor, I am proposing that we enact strict new limits to protect kids and teens on social media, that we require parental notification and age verification on all of these platforms, and that we prevent social media companies from basically exploiting our young people for profit. That's a lot of what's going on with advertising revenue and the like. The other thing that we've seen is the use of AI, and I know there'll be conversations about deep fakes and other things, but we're at a point where we really do need to get a handle on all of this, and a handle on all of this probably yesterday. It's a national issue the federal government should be leading, But of course, right now, in my view, we have a federal administration that day to day is part of the problem in what it presents and puts up. So I'm looking forward to tonight's conversation. Everybody's affected by all of this, and all of us are disserved by the current dynamics. The more that we can speak to one another, truly commune with one another, spend time with one another, look each other in the eye, talk to one another, the better that we will be. It's not to say there isn't a place, in my view, for social media. There is, and I know it has the capacity, as I scroll myself every night, to bring us joy, laughter, entertainment, and a sense of community. But the reality, we know, is that these are very challenging times, and I appreciate tonight's conversation and the opportunity to confront polarization and to talk about a way forward and a better path. And with that, I would like to turn this over to your leader, Dean Jeremy Weinstein.
Thank you, Governor Healy, for your remarks and your leadership, including during the extraordinary snowstorm that has buried us over the past few days. People know that I am a recent transplant from California to Boston. My 16-year-old was unenthused by the shoveling that we needed to do over the past 48 hours, but I got my cardio in. Thanks also to all of you for joining us as we begin the Forum's spring semester programming with tonight's event on polarization. Our country has profound differences, not just about the specifics of policy, but also about our core values and our political priorities. In fact, one of the few things that a supermajority of Americans can agree on is the severity of this division. The New York Times and Siena College routinely ask Americans about the divisions within our political system. This past October, for the very first time, nearly 2/3 of Americans responded that our system of government is too politically divided to solve the nation's problems. Now, it's important to remember that profound differences have always been a part of our political life in America. From the beginning, the founders disagreed deeply over the powers of Congress and the presidency, the limits of taxation, and the institution of slavery. More recently, as a nation, we have had to grapple with significant differences over issues including abortion, the climate, immigration, and the U.S. role in the world. But our country has endured despite these disagreements. This is in part thanks to strong democratic institutions, which made space for vigorous debate and updated the law to reflect compromise when it was reached. We've also drawn strength from courageous leaders who believed in America's promise and sought to govern through the divisions. These leaders found ways to reconcile seemingly irreconcilable political differences, to defend our institutions and improve the lives of all Americans. So tonight, we're joined by two public servants who follow in that great tradition, Governor Spencer Cox of Utah and Representative Jake Auchincloss of Massachusetts' 4th District. Governor Cox made national headlines in September, following the killing of Charlie Kirk at Utah State University. At a moment when many in politics defaulted to rage or retribution, Governor Cox called for calm. He urged young people to, quote, build a culture that is very different than what we are suffering through right now. Not by pretending that differences don't matter, but by embracing our differences and having those hard conversations. It's a culture that he has worked hard to foster through the Disagree Better initiative that Governor Healy mentioned, that Governor Cox led through the National Governors Association. In his time in Congress, Representative Auchincloss has worked to define what he calls a new center with an organization he has spearheaded, Majority Democrats. In a September blog post, he pitched a guiding philosophy for the movement that combines diverse ideas from all points on the political spectrum. respect for faith, family, and the flag from conservatives, a commitment to individual freedom from liberals, healthy skepticism of centralized power from libertarians, and a commitment to equal opportunity from progressives. Governor Cox and Congressman Auchincloss have several differences. They come from different parts of the country, different political parties, different faith traditions, and yet they share much as well. A shared belief in the power of service, a shared faith in America's democratic principles, and a shared concern about the challenge that technology poses to our divided country. In the Utah State Capitol and the U.S. Congress, Governor Cox and Congressman Auchincloss have called attention to the addictive nature of social media, the threat of deceptive and abusive synthetic content, and the transformative effect of AI on the labor market and our economy. Governor Cox led one of the nation's first efforts to regulate social media access for minors, while Congressman Auchincloss has called for the revocation of tech companies' liability protections over deepfakes. Both are keenly aware of the distortions that are exacerbated by social media's echo chambers and the way that those distortions can fracture our shared sense of a common reality. And both understand that the march of technology ought to reflect the priorities of our democracy instead of letting our democracy be shaped by the unconstrained growth of new technologies. I'm grateful to both of them for taking the time to be with us this evening. Through both their ideas and their actions, Governor Cox and Representative Auchincloss demonstrate what is possible when Americans work toward shared ends rather than focus on scoring political points. It's conversations like this one that help us confront the challenges of polarization and build momentum for meaningful policy action that can be embraced by Americans on all sides. With that, please join me in welcoming Governor Cox, Representative Auchincloss, and they're accompanied by Nancy Gibbs, the Lombard Director of the Shorenstein Center and the Edward R. Murrow Professor of the Practice of Press, Politics, and Public Policy. Welcome.
Thank you, Jeremy, and thank you, gentlemen, for the lengths to which you went to join us. I promise my questions will get progressively more optimistic, but I'm bound by the protocols of the Guild of Journalists to start with the news. And we have been watching the spectacle of violence in Minneapolis these last weeks. As Jeremy noted, Governor Cox, you were on the front lines of a terrible act of political violence over the summer, and Congressman, you go to work every day at the scene of an unprecedented act of political violence on January 6th. Large majorities of Americans renounce political violence and say that they think it's a serious problem. But there's a 20-point gap between older people and people under 30 in the numbers that think that sometimes political violence may be necessary. And so I'm curious if you have a theory about why that is. Is that Jeremy talked about the importance of strong democratic institutions and compromise? Is it a loss of faith that those institutions can solve problems? Is it culture? Is it conditioning? How do you explain that larger appetite for violence?
Well, it's great to be here. Do you want to go first?
I'll take a crack at it. Thanks for that softball, Nancy.
There are no softballs here.
First of all, it's really wonderful to be here with everybody. I appreciate everyone coming out on such a cold night, and it's such a pleasure to be here with Governor Cox, a man I really admire. Everyone, there's whole theses that can be written on this. Here's my high-level view on it. An acceptance of violence and extremism and the dehumanization that is integrated with that viewpoint comes when you stop thinking that you have a shared future with other people, when you stop thinking of the American people as a demos, where we all have one shared future together. And I think the reason that that sense of a shared future is deteriorating, in part, is that our sense of a shared reality is deteriorating. And partly that's because of social media. Not entirely, but partly it's because we have atomized our attention spans through social media. What I'm seeing, what the governor's seeing, what any of you are seeing, is a cloak that is being wrapped around you by your previous preferences and by the identity profiling done by the tech companies. And without a sense of a shared reality, it's hard to have a sense of a shared future, and it's hard to have a sense of common humanity.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And again, thanks for having me. It's great to be back. Nancy, thanks for doing this. That is correct. We are living in these atomized worlds that are so very different. I will tell you, with some of those numbers, we've probed those numbers a little bit and looked at some different polling, and how you ask the question kind of determines a different answer. The truth is that really only about 3% of Americans support political violence as we're talking about it today. But there is a difference, a generational difference for sure. And I think the lack of trust in institutions is hugely important in this. Trust is the currency of governing. And we're seeing the Edelman Group does surveys every year in 50 different countries. They look at trust across different institutions, government being one of those, trust in the media, trust in nonprofits, and trust in for-profit institutions are kind of the four areas they always look at. And it won't surprise any of you to learn that trust is declining in all four of those areas, but especially when it comes to government. And they define trust in a very simple way. Trust, what it takes to gain trust in something, whatever it is, it's about kind of doing good and being good. Those are the things. So are you competent? And are you ethical? Those are the two things that are necessary for trust to happen. Think about your neighbor. If you have an unethical neighbor, but they're wildly competent, you still probably wouldn't trust them with your car or your kids. And conversely, they may be the nicest, most ethical person in the world, but if they're incompetent, you're also not going to trust them with your car or your kid, right? You need those two things. And government is kind of bad at both of those right now. We're not delivering on the promises that we've made to people. So the competency is at a low level, and there's so much evidence of grift and just unethical behavior in so many ways that it is destroying trust, especially among young people. And too many people are asking the question, like, why are we even doing this? What is this all about? And I hope that the 250th anniversary of the Declaration of Independence is a great opportunity for us to remember why we're doing this, and to try to have a shared message, opportunities like this to talk across the aisle in a way that brings more trust to government.
I mean, another question social scientists have asked forever and ever, they ask parents how you would feel if your child married someone from different race, different religion. And it is only recently that the one sort of disqualifying thing is if your child married someone from the other political party. And I'm curious about why you think it is that somehow, whether you suit up in Team Red or Team Blue became so core to people's identity, where political identification became more important than in how people thought of themselves than race or religion or income or urban versus rural. Or how did that happen?
Well, I have some theories, and many of them emanate from this place, from Harvard. So this is something that I think dates back many years. I'll go back to the 1830s when Alexis de Tocqueville came here, and he saw this country that was really interesting. We did things differently. We formed these associations together. Many of them were religious and others, but we found ways to work together to solve our problems that were kind of outside of government. Fast forward, Dr. Putnam here writes a book 26 years ago called Bowling Alone, that finding that we'd lost many of those institutions, right? And so we're kind of lonelier than we've ever been before, where everybody's bowling, but there's no bowling leagues, right? We're not bowling together. And then you introduce social media, and that just puts all of it on steroids. So we don't have real friends in the real world. We're not going to church anymore. We're not Rotarians. We're not doing that kind of stuff. And we're desperate for connection. And somebody hands us this little box that says that we can be connected to everyone. And at first it's awesome. Our friends, our family, we all know what everybody else is doing all the time, only the good things, of course, right? Which make us jealous of what they're doing. And then these algorithms come in and just tear us apart, basically. Put us into tribes. We don't have any real friends, but we can hate the same people together on social media. And so that becomes our tribe. And I just believe it's this kind of perfect storm of things that have brought us to this moment, and that's at least my theory in a nutshell, very quickly, of how we got here and what led us to this moment in time.
Congress, does that make sense?
It does, from bowling alone to scrolling alone.
That's it. Yeah, that's the stuff.
The other, cliche is about politics being downstream from culture, but it feels like they're increasingly almost indistinguishable. That stagecraft is statecraft, and I'm wondering if you think, particularly as you look at members of Congress, about how much performance of their role as opposed to doing the job has taken up more and more and more of the energy.
I certainly think it's true that culture is upstream of politics, and that if the American public doesn't believe that a party has a sense of what the good life is, that they're unlikely to trust that party to help them deliver that good life. You have to have an ethic of improvement, and you have to campaign on that ethic of improvement. But I don't necessarily agree that the American public is hungry for stagecraft to upstage statecraft. I actually think that people are pretty exhausted by the just ongoing clown show that is this administration, and there's the rolling incompetence, whether it's DOGE, whether it's ICE. It's always some kind of witch's brew of incompetence, cruelty, and conspiracy. And I think actually it's really demoralizing and exhausting. And there is absolutely an opportunity to campaign on making politics boring again.
So probably for a lot of the reasons you suggest, we're seeing record numbers of people who are saying they're just disengaging from news. And certainly the overwhelming majority say they never post about politics or current events on social media. They don't want to be in the fight, which means that the public square is increasingly occupied by people who are the loudest voices. As you both work to lower the temperature, that has to start with getting people to be willing to re-engage in the conversation in the first place. How do you go about doing that?
I would say, I don't know that you try to pull people into political spaces. I think you got to go out and meet them in where they're at, in their spaces. And I'm constantly banging the table, I'm sure you are too, Governor, that Twitter's not real life. And so when I'm trying to get my pulse, I represent 800,000 people. And when I'm trying to get my pulse on the public opinion of my district, I try to get a kaleidoscope of input. So I'm doing walking tours of towns where I'm talking to local officials, I'm meeting with small business owners, I'm talking to faith leaders, I'm talking to financial advisors who are themselves advising my constituents. I'm obviously doing town halls, we're doing teletown halls, Zoom town halls, in-person town halls. Polling, yes, I will look at online, but that is just one element of the input. So it's really incumbent on elected leaders to not do the lazy thing and passively consume the feed and be like, well, that's where people are at. No, go out there and do the work and figure out where people are at. It's not their job to come and engage with you on your terms. It's your job to go out there and make sure that you're reflecting the heartbeat.
Yeah, I'll challenge the question just a little bit. I think we need more people to disengage. I really do. I think it's very unhealthy. Our brains, our evolution as human beings, did not prepare us for this moment. First of all, through history, we only knew about 150 people, and this idea that we would have the 5,000 friends on Facebook is not normal for our brains. We also didn't know throughout history all the bad things that were happening everywhere in the moment, right? When you did get the information, the bad thing was already over and you had a little time. I mean, think about the Charlie Kirk shooting and how many of you saw that within 5 minutes of it happening. You saw a gruesome death that, again, our brains are not prepared to handle. People came back from Vietnam who saw stuff like that and have been traumatized forever. And we're showing 5-year-old kids, 8-year-old kids in minutes this happening with a close-up, right? We are not capable of processing all of this terrible stuff. And it's very damaging to our mental health, this kind of locus of control, this external locus of control where where all of these bad things are happening and I feel helpless to do anything about it. But maybe this time, if I post on Twitter, it will change the world, right? If I just one more tersely worded post will change everything, and it doesn't happen. And so I actually believe that we would be much better off not telling our young people, except maybe Harvard graduates, to go and change the world. That instead of saying go and change the world, which you're not going to do, that we should be telling people to go and change their neighborhoods, to focus there and to serve and give back and volunteer at the local food bank. Go ask your neighbor how they're doing. That's the kind of stuff we need, not more people cosplaying national politics. It doesn't mean you should ignore what's happening out there, but what it does mean is that you're actually doing something where you can make a difference. That's better for you, and ultimately that is how we change the world, by strengthening our communities. I just have to say, I'm a Twitter addict and have been for a long time. I took it off of my phone 6 weeks ago, so I'm 6 weeks sober. And
how are you feeling?
It's the best thing I've done. I mean that sincerely. I will say for the first 4 days at least, I would pull my phone out, and every time I clicked on there, like the rat in the cage trying to get the drug water, pushing the button. Like I did that instinctually, and it wasn't there. The app was no longer there, and I still did it, and instinctively. I think I made up a word. And now I'm over that, and it's been much healthier for me. It's been better for my family. It's better for my constituents as well, because he's absolutely right that the face-to-face engagement, having real conversations with people, that's the real world. That's where culture really is, and there is an exhausted majority out there. I truly believe that. We need to make politics boring again. This politics is entertainment. It burns itself out very quickly, and people are tired of it.
Both of you have been extremely thoughtful about what will it take to build some guardrails and to at least bring some constraints around the power of these extraordinarily powerful platforms. So I wanted to talk a little about what is psychologically and politically and legally possible. Congressman, in addition to lifting the liability shield around deepfakes, you've proposed the unanxious generation bill. Can you talk a little about what that would do?
Unanxious generation is a series of 3 bills, and the premise behind these 3 bills, happy to go into the policy details, is we need a touchgrass temperance movement around social media. For the last 15 years, the conversation about social media has been one of political economy. It's been about antitrust laws. Can Bing share browser data with Google? Like, my constituents don't care about that. They don't care. It's been questions about First Amendment and free speech that are always going to favor the legal terrain of the big tech companies. And what we need instead is to put the lens on this question not of political economy, not of antitrust and M&A and First Amendment, but of public health. And to treat what is happening with social media actually analogously to how we treated alcohol, which is to say, hey, it can be fun. It can be fun. It's a social lubricant. Don't do it while you're driving. Don't do it too much. And kids probably shouldn't do it, right? And a series of norms and laws reinforcing that sort of cultural movement. And that's what we need for social media. It's not about wagging your finger and being like, you can never use any social media. No, it's about saying temperance, everything in moderation. And particularly understanding, I think, 2 of the deleterious effects of social media that are most in need of that temperance approach. One is their effect on kids. The way that social media works, this is true of online gambling as well, is that they hijack your dopamine reinforcement system, your ventral striatum. Very sensitive in developing brains, and it's paired with an immature prefrontal cortex. So basically, you've got really highly sensitive risk-seeking behavior that really wants novel stimuli. And these social media firms have become experts at rewiring the dopamine mechanisms of young brains and really creating addictive pathways. That's not good. I don't care if you're a big company or a small company. I don't care if Facebook buys Instagram or not. That's not good, and we should regulate that. And the second thing it does is it atomizes us. It atomizes our attention spans. All of our attention spans has gone down over the last 15 years. It's pretty scary, actually. Can't focus on stuff. And it atomizes our sense of a shared reality as a country. One of the surprising things, actually, about what's happening in Minnesota is that it feels to me like for the first time in a long time, we're actually all paying attention to the same thing right now as a country. And it's remarkable what happens when that happens, right? Because the administration is trying to gaslight and lie, as they do about so many things. And one of the reasons that they are losing is that we're all actually watching the same thing at the same time. Isn't that a nice feeling, actually, as horrible as what's happening, to actually be in an experience together with other people? And it's the absolute most potent force against proto-fascism.
So how do you think about some of Jonathan Haidt's work around age gating?
Yep.
How realistic is that? That we've seen an enormous movement around cell phone bans
Yep.
in schools. You have social media bans now in Australia and I think France. What do you see the prospects realistically of some of those?
I've got the bipartisan bill to do it, starting at 13, and then if we can get the political buy-in to 16. But I've got the bipartisan bill to do the age gating. I won't go into all the technical and legal weeds. It's complicated, but we are doing it. I've also got legislation that would make clear that AI-generated content does not get a liability shield under Section 230. If an AI bot is giving you medical advice that a doctor would give you, it should be able to be sued like a doctor can be sued. And same thing like a journalism or mental health therapist or other things. And then finally, I've got a bill that, frankly, would just tax the daylights out of these companies and use the money to fund trade schools and one-on-one tutoring.
And Governor Cox, you too have proposed like almost a modern sin tax, like on alcohol and tobacco.
Yep.
How would that work, and how would you use the revenues?
So we're still working through the details of that. So I'm in a legislative session right now, and we're working with the attorneys. There's a case in Maryland right now. We're kind of waiting for a decision there, so we can figure out how to design that. But to the Congressman's point, and I think it's really important. This is a public health issue, and he used alcohol as the example. I'll use tobacco because these companies are acting like the tobacco companies, and that's one of the things we found out through some of this legislation and litigation that has come out of it, is that they knew the harms. They've tried to hide that. They've acted just like those companies. The only difference is they're much more powerful than the tobacco companies. I mean, these are the wealthiest, most powerful companies in the history of the world. We've never seen anything quite like it, and they're acting incredibly irresponsible. In an irresponsible way, and it's bad not just for our kids, but it's bad for the adults too. And so I'm grateful that we're getting some help at the national level. That there are members of Congress that are interested in this. It is one of the rare areas of bipartisanship that we're seeing right now. Everybody knows it. The bans in schools are very important. So grateful to our mutual friend Jonathan Haidt and the work they're doing out there, and grateful that there are some of us. Derek Thompson mentioned us when he was interviewing you as the touchgrass populist. That we're trying to get more people involved in. This is the good kind of populism, I promise. We need more of this, and these are the types of ideas that are coming forward that can really make a difference.
You're both proposing these initiatives at a time that we've been watching some extraordinary attempted consolidation within the media industry. Just this week, we're seeing the TikTok change of ownership. We've got the fight over Warner Brothers Discovery following the fight over Paramount. How concerned are you about the concentration of control over some of these platforms in a smaller number of hands?
Probably less concerned, but go ahead.
The three most powerful architects of media, information, opinion in the world are Mark Zuckerberg, Elon Musk, and the Chinese Communist Party, because of their ownership of TikTok. So yeah, I'm concerned about that. I don't like that. I don't think any of us should want those three to be the arbiters and the architects of your feed. And they, believe me, they are. They are deciding what information is cocooning around you. So I absolutely have a problem with that type of consolidated power. I think there's a very healthy American tradition of just being very skeptical of any kind of concentration of corporate or government power to that extent. But to my earlier point, I think probably what Governor Cox would say as well is...
This is what I'm referring to, not the first part. I agree with you.
The M&A stuff, the antitrust stuff, the neo-Brandishian approach to all this, the sort of like, let's dust off the Sherman Antitrust Act and see if we can use it. It's the wrong... I shouldn't say it's the wrong tool. Maybe it can help. But the right tool is a public health focus that says, I don't care if you're big or small, you can't mess up you can't treat my children like a product.
So we saw jury selection, I think, yesterday for a trial looking to hold both Meta and YouTube accountable for harms to adolescent mental health. Do you, even as states and federal efforts around regulation continue, where do you see the courts in some of these suits fitting into this?
Well, we're involved in several lawsuits, both offensively and defensively. We're suing all the major companies. Some of them we're suing alone as Utah. Some we're joining with other states to file those lawsuits, and they're suing us because of many of the laws we've passed to protect our kids. And it's incredibly frustrating. I mean, they'll come and meet with me and say, "Hey, we care as much about your kids as you do, and we're going to do all these things." And I'm like, "Then why are you suing me? Like, if you really cared, then let's do this." And so we should be skeptical of this type of consolidated power. And I'm grateful that these other suits are moving forward as well, the kind of personal injury type lawsuits. And I'm hopeful that they will respond to that. If it hits them in their wallet, that's when we'll start to see the changes that we desperately need. And I do believe we do need more competition. One of the bills we passed in Utah that's very unique, that we're proud of, that we're hoping we can get at a national level, but it's a data portability bill. Think back to the 96 Telecommunications Act for some of the older people in this room. For those of you who don't know this, you used to, if you changed to a different telephone company, you had to get a new phone number. You didn't get to keep your number. And the federal government came and said, no, you have to share that data and be able to port your number, and some other things came out of that. We've passed something similar with these companies that give you all ownership of all of the data they have on you, the social graph that is their proprietary property. It's not, it's you. It's part of your individual personhood, and you get that. And the hope is that this will allow for more competition. The problem is they kind of have us, right? You've been on Facebook for 12 years now, 13 years, whatever, and all your friends are there, and you hate it. It's terrible. The algorithm is driving everything. It's not what it used to be. But where are you going to go? The new startup comes and you can't take your stuff with you. You have to start all over, and none of your friends are there. If there's a way to do that, we think we can change, hopefully, the entire nature of who owns that, and that opens up the ability for more competition and maybe better outcomes than what we're seeing now.
It feels like we're replaying already some of the arguments maybe that didn't happen soon enough or loudly enough around social media, and now around AI, and whether states should be allowed to be putting up guardrails. How do you see that playing out? Is it a cautionary tale around what did not happen with platforms and the speed with which we're seeing AI models increase in their capacity?
So, I mean, as Governor Healy was saying, we here in Massachusetts should embrace science and technology. I'm bullish on AI's potential for science, for robotics, for our ability to build faster, better, cheaper in the world of atoms. I'm very concerned about AI putting on steroids the social media business model in the world of bits. And let me just, a little parable here that should, I think, scare all of us. We can all remember the horrific school shooting at Sandy Hook in Connecticut 10 years ago. And after that, Alex Jones of InfoWars went out and said it was a hoax, said the children who were murdered were actors. And he then proceeded over the next 5 years to defame these families. Some of them had to move. Really one of the most despicable actions that I can think of in the 21st century. Ultimately, he was sued for defamation. Who wasn't sued was YouTube. YouTube had been propagating his vitriol and his defamatory lies for years. And YouTube just said, hey, we're just a bookstore, all right? Anybody can write a book. You can't sue the bookstore. I mean, give me a break. YouTube is not a bookstore, okay? That algorithm is editorial in nature. They are making a decision. Now, imagine, unfortunately, I don't think we have to imagine, another school shooting. And this time, because of deep fakes, someone like Alex Jones goes out there and he starts disseminating images of these murdered children and videos of these murdered children. And don't think that someone out there won't do this to get clicks and likes. And again, that person might be able to be sued, but there's no legal channel for those images to be taken down, for those videos to be taken down, or for YouTube or TikTok to be sued for platforming this horrific content that's going to haunt these grieving families. This is what my bill would prevent from happening, and this is what these corporations are fighting tooth and nail. They don't want to have, at the board level, any conversations about a duty of care to cauterize some of the toxicity that they are platforming here, and we have to force them to do it.
And you are seeing more of a bipartisan appetite?
The Congresswoman from Utah, I'm proud to say, Celeste Malloy, is the Republican lead on this bill. I don't want to be naive about this thing. We're up against the tech lobby here. They hate it. They're building a $10 billion data center in the speaker's home state of Louisiana. I think that probably helps their case with him and bringing these kind of bills to the floor. But we're on the right side here, and there's a growing support behind it.
Yeah.
I want to open the floor to students, and we have 4 microphones, and so I'm going to invite you to make your way to the microphones and be sure to introduce yourself and ask a brief question, because I want to make sure we get to as many students as we can. While they're doing that, my final question, I want to go, we came out of the 2024 election with large majorities of people saying that democracy itself was at risk, under threat, imperiled, but having very, very different ideas about what the threat was, what the nature of the threat was. What will it take beyond, changing what is in our feeds to move us to a time where we see the people we disagree with, merely we think they're wrong, but we don't necessarily think that they're evil? How do you see that happening beyond just, we need to come together in real life more?
Yeah, well, we need to come together in real life more. There's no easy answer to this. What I will say is elections have consequences, and we need elections to have consequences. And so parties respond to shellackings, and we'll see what happens this year. But I do think that it really is a collective decision that we're tired of this, that we want something different, that we start to support candidates who offer something different, and that we respond positively when the candidates do work across the aisle and actually do some things. We should try to reward that type of behavior instead of punish that type of behavior. And if you're the kind of person who thinks that your member of Congress has to agree with you on every single thing, and if you see them even starting to flirt with the center or someone on the other side, that's completely unacceptable. Just know that you're part of the problem. The incentive structure right now is so messed up, and we've got to find ways to reward the boring stuff where we actually accomplish things instead of just the people who are really good at making you mad. Like if that's the incentive structure, we're going to keep getting the performative instead of the substantive.
I would also note very quickly that actually Harvard's own Danielle Allen is leading an initiative, a ballot campaign in 2026 to change our primary system from a semi-closed to a top 2. That will, I think, significantly and helpfully reform electoral incentives here in Massachusetts for the State House, for the federal delegation, in a way that supports, I think, galvanizing the exhaustive majority and helping to heal the country.
Right. Thank you. Yeah.
James, and I'm a junior at the college, and I wanted to ask you, Senator, sort of what's your perspective? Would you say there's a trade-off between regulating AI and having it innovate and improve? Not saying that the companies aren't at times acting irresponsibly, but would you say there's a trade-off there? And if there's a trade-off there, how do you think about sort of managing that in terms of policy?
Yeah, I view it in terms of trying to regulate outcomes, not technologies. It makes, to me, about as much sense to kind of like regulate AI, which is, by the way, changing every 3 months, and Congress does not operate on 3-month timelines, as it would to regulate C++ or R or Python or any other kind of tool of programming and development of new products and software. To me, it's regulating outcomes. So, for example, one of the things that I want us to have to do is for the Consumer Product Safety Commission to work with the National Academies of Science and Engineering and Medicine to determine the actual effects of dopamine on the developing brain. And to allow, in the same way that the Consumer Product Safety Commission tells parents about whether a bicycle helmet is safe or not, what the effect is of that bicycle helmet on your kid's safety, to be able to say, here, there's this app. This is broadly, whether it's Roblox or something else, broadly what the app does to your child's developing brain. And hold companies liable to that, the thing that we really care about. And then technology is going to change super, super fast, and Congress doesn't have to keep up. What will keep up is the liability and the ability of states' attorney general and the private sector to hold them accountable for it.
Can I add something to that? So one of the things we've done in Utah that we're very proud of, we think is a model to the nation, and most of the AI companies agree with us. So we've made a clear distinction between the AI development itself and the actual tools that are being produced for consumers. And what we've done is we've created a safe harbor where companies can come in. We started an AI policy lab led by a mathematician, an AI expert from one of our universities who leads this lab. So for example, we worked on AI therapy chatbots last year. So the companies come in, they share their work with us, they work with legislators to try to figure out what the guardrails are going to be to protect people from the bad effects of an AI therapy chatbot that could get you in a lot of trouble. And in so doing, we're not, look, the development of your model, that's up to you. We're not going to touch that stuff. We're in an AI arms race with China. We need to win that. We want to make sure that we have the dominant models out there. That's very important. We want to solve the worst parts of society, the worst things in society that are happening out there. AI has the ability to help us with cancer research, all these cool things that are amazing out there. But that doesn't mean that we should have hands off when you're providing sexualized chatbots to 7-year-olds. Like that's where the state should be involved, and that's the distinction. I think it's a really important distinction to make so that we're not stopping the good side of AI and the development that's happening, but we're also not just saying like we did with social media, which was a huge mistake. It's like, hey, there's nothing we can do about this. Yeah, sure, our kids are killing each other, and they all have eating disorders, and they're addicted to gambling, but that's just something we have to accept. That's crazy, and we shouldn't do that. We have to learn from our mistakes.
Hello, my name is Hussam. I'm a freshman at the college studying government. First and foremost, I want to echo what the governor of Massachusetts said initially. Thank you so much for being here and taking the time on something that's so difficult to discuss and yet so necessary. And what I'm particularly appreciative of is your sort of macro level analysis, where you're looking at AI and social media and all of these things that affect the electorate on a national scale. But as I'm sitting in my chair and I'm thinking about, how I could ask a question that is most feasible for me personally, I want to take a more micro approach with this question, which is kind of what the final question the moderator asked here alluded to, which is sort of what are the measurable steps, sort of the measurable steps that we as individuals who are consuming all of this media can take in our day-to-day lives to affect the political change that we want to see? How do we approach the political aisle and go down and make sure that we're incorporating information in the most objective way possible? And how do we stay vigilant of AI and social media and other matters of the sort?
It's a very thoughtful question. Let me put two things out there. One is, and I'll just name actually specific projects, because in the spirit of your question, very specific. One is the First Person Project. The First Person Project is being led in part by Linux, and it's trying to create a social graph that is not anonymous, that connects humans to each other based on affinity, but is done in a way that is still taking advantages of like the ability of digital connection to scale, but is not doing it in a way that is anonymous and just kind of platforms vitriol. So I think that's an interesting project to get involved in, this First Person Project by Linux. And the other one is Strong Towns. Strong Towns is about localism and about making your local community better, housing, transportation, energy policy, et cetera. And Strong Towns has chapters throughout the country.
Yeah, I would concur. Again, the local level is so important, being able to get involved there, being able to make a difference as close to home as possible. I would encourage robust debate. I feel like, so there's some interesting data out there that young people who are involved in debate at the high school or college level are much less polarized than the rest of the country. And it's something that we used to do till 3 in the morning in our dorm rooms. It doesn't happen nearly as much as it used to because people are too afraid that they'll be attacked or they'll be canceled, or we've got to create forums for robust debate about issues that matter and still be friends afterward, understanding how to be able to do that. And that's something I would love to see our institutions of higher learning do more of.
Thanks. Thank you so much.
Hi, I'm John. I'm second year at HKS. So my question's really about the issue of free speech versus mass censorship. And one theme that I kind of saw recurring here, and also that's kind of a major issue now, is with you mentioned guardrails and what types of constraints big tech companies are placing on people's ability to post things and to speak freely and to see things like such as the images you mentioned. One thing that I'm wondering about is how excessive government influence on big tech in pressure to engage in greater censorship is really like restricting people's ability to coordinate opposition against the current regime and to speak freely. Because I know, like for example, a lot of platforms like Facebook, LinkedIn, now increasingly TikTok, now that it's under hostile control, are basically being used to silence Americans who speak out against real injustice, and what can really be done about that.
So I may have a different answer than the congressman, and I don't pretend to speak for him, but what I will say is this when it comes to Section 230 liability, and that is if you're providing a platform and people want to post on that platform, I have no problem with that. I don't think there should be any censorship. I don't think there should be any liability there. Once you create an algorithm, okay, you are putting your thumb on the scale, and now you are responsible for what that algorithm produces. So if you want to go back to, and I think we should, I think that should be an option on every platform, to go back to a non-algorithm feed for people, then I don't think there should be any responsibility whatsoever. People can share and follow whomever they want. But the minute you put an algorithm out there, you are now putting your thumb on the scale and you're responsible. I guess I will speak more.
Thank you both, Governor and Congressman, for being here. My name is Will. I'm a health policy student here from Florida. As someone who's Catholic, I've seen how faith can be a source of meaning and service in people's lives. But I've also felt that part of today's polarization arises from politicians and political influencers increasingly invoking religious themes beyond traditional policy, where people feel that they have God on their side or party. How do we recognize and honor the role faith plays in many American lives while still keeping our political system grounded in pluralism and shared civic principles?
Well, you just missed an incredible 2-hour panel that I was on an hour ago about that very topic, and I would encourage you. There's a great project happening here at Harvard about that. But your question is the answer, and that is we need to, the founders of our country believe very strongly that the only way that this experiment in self-government would work is if we had a moral and a religious people. Now, again, you can be moral without being religious, and that was historically the best way for people to learn morality, to learn the virtues. We've heard about temperance already tonight, one of Franklin's 13 virtues that he felt were so important for all of us. We should be, for too long, we kind of pushed religion out of the public square and made it, we had to pretend like that's not something that we talk about in government, and that I can't be a whole person and I can't let you know about my faith. That was a mistake, okay? And we should not be using religion to benefit one sect over another, to kind of force our godlike beliefs on other people. We do believe in a pluralistic society. They believed in that as well. There's this interesting paradox. It's interesting in human history that we would have both of these things, that we would want a very religious people, but also not have a government that was mandating a specific religion. And that's where I think we've started to cross over for sure, and we have to be really, really careful about that. And again, elections have consequences, and that's where we need to push back if that's something that you don't believe in. Sorry, you should, I'll stop
2 for 2, Governor.
All right.
Thank you.
Hi, thanks to the 2 speakers. My name is Rebecca Larson. I grew up in Fairview. Governor Cox?
Oh my gosh, hi, how are you?
Hi, I'm good. I don't know if we ever met or if you remember us meeting.
No, I know exactly who you are. So you guys, there's only 1,200 people in Fairview, Utah, so like this is us. We know each other.
Yeah, I had to sign up when I saw your name. Fairview.
This is a question for Jake.
No, it's actually more so for you.
Oh, okay, all right, sorry, Jake.
And I'm going to try to keep it within the, oh yeah, I was a previous fellow at HLS. I'm now a professor at MIT.
Congratulations.
Thank you. So I'll try to keep this within the sort of framing of social media, since I understand that's the topic here, but I want to bring the conversation back to what's happening in Minnesota.
Sure.
Congressman, you alluded to imagined communities, how this is a powerful moment. We all know that our president is obsessed with Fox News and takes his cues there policy-wise. Has any of this changed the way that both of you think about or approach media today? And I cannot believe that I'm asking this question, because I very much agree with both of you on many of the fronts about regulating, but this is a very particular moment, and the way that both of you have responded to the moment has an impact, a measurable impact. So I would love for both of you to speak to that. And
Sure.
Governor, we grew up in a very conservative, religious, rural place. Like, this is a moment where bipartisanship, in terms of stagecraft, could make a difference.
And is making a difference. And I think that's really important here at this moment. Look, if 10 years ago, I would have been having this conversation about the dangers of cable news, because this started before social media. Again, Bowling alone, we talked about how we were separating and atomizing at many years ago, and I think this really did kind of start with cable news. We turned off cable news 13 years ago now, and it changed our whole family dynamic. Now, it doesn't mean you shouldn't be paying attention, and there's different ways to do that are less I mean, again, they use professionals. They're hijacking our brains. They know what they're doing. They figured out that outrage is a dopamine hit, and so then when cable news, when we started yelling at each other, that's when the dopamine hits started, and so we have to be really careful about that. And all of that being said, and again, I hope this is a terrible tragedy, never should have happened, but I hope it gives us all a little bit of faith in Madison et al. That there is still an impact. There's a massive change happening with the administration over the weekend, because we had this collective moment, because there was pushback, because people were seeing something that was different than what they were being told. I can tell you that the pushback was even greater than what you've seen behind the scenes. There was a lot of that happening, and it did make a difference. I know it maybe doesn't feel that way to everyone right now, but this is evidence that we can swing things. So again, it's not about censorship, it's not about preventing people from saying things, but it is about making sure that we have a healthier relationship with media so we can avoid some of these outcomes. Please.
The way I think about this is, first of all, I go on Fox News every time they'll have me.
Same here. Yeah. Unfortunately.
50% of Fox News viewers are persuadable. 50% are not. 50% are persuadable. I think it's an important part of public service to go out there and just lay the facts in front of a candid audience. What is interesting, though, and Derek Thompson actually said this, you had alluded to him earlier, all of these media formats are becoming television. One of the most interesting filings from Facebook's discovery was when they revealed that only about 5 to 7% of the content on Facebook is from your social graph. Almost all of the rest of it is a continuous stream of video. Well, what's another word for a continuous stream of video? It's television, right? And Governor, you'd said that cable news kind of started this. I think it's all the same thing.
Yes.
I think cable news is a series of clips and video shots that are meant to stimulate your brain. Your feed, whether it's TikTok or Insta or Facebook, is a stream of video that is meant to stimulate your brain, oftentimes taking advantage of the 7 deadly sins. And that's the media environment that we live in. We are a species that devours the visual much more than the number of bits that we can devour through visual is very, very high. It is very stimulating for us. And so I think a lot about, how can I use video for good? I don't want to be performative on video. I think we have enough politicians doing that. But this is the nature of our media reality right now. So how can we use social media video to be like a backstage pass into in real life community, where you can show people the goodness and the common sense and the decency that's out in real life by giving them like those behind the scenes that MTV used to do. Now I'm dating myself.
Oh, this is incredible.
Right?
Wow. But it's still, when they had music, or no, where they were done with music by then?
They were done with music.
Yeah, see, you're way too young. Okay.
And I haven't cracked that nut yet, and I can almost guarantee you that in 2028, the top tier presidential candidates, at least on the Democratic side, are going to be using social media not as a bulletin board. I did this, I did this, I did this. It's going to be more like, come along with me. Come watch this with me.
Well, and I think you saw that with the Mamdani race,
He did this
right?
well.
He was very good at that. And I'm trying to get people to turn off all the TV and read David Copperfield, which is what I'm doing now in lieu of my Twitter feed. I'm actually trying to read long form again, and I think that's very important. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is James. I'm a first-year student here at the college, and I'm studying economics. And actually, you guys touched on it briefly, but most of what we're trying to affect here with policy is in the incentives of these social media companies, as well as politicians and these creators on social media. And I'm very curious, as people who are in that political world, how can we affect the incentives of politicians, where there's this kind of collective action problem, where politicians themselves are using this kind of corrosive language that breeds a lot of this polarization because they think it'll bring them that popularity, taking shots at other politicians, instead of actually coming together, which is boring, like you said, and we need that kind of boring politics. How can we create the incentive structure so we have politicians that come together and create those solutions instead of throwing hands at each other? And again, before you answer, thank you so much for being here. Again, this is a really important issue. And as you said, Governor Cox, I'm actually a debater for all of high school and continue here at Harvard. And it's so important to have these conversations. And too many times, whether it's with friends, family, having these conversations is like a fight instead of just a discussion. So really, thank you.
To be really specific, I think there's 3 state-level electoral reforms. There is what Alaska or California has done with the top 2 or the top 4 in Alaska's case. And again, Danielle Allen here at Harvard leading the charge on this one. So top 2, as California does. I think New Jersey's redistricting system is actually quite good and creates a map that's pretty fair. And then what Maine is trying to do by capping the flow of dark money into their campaigns, by capping the contributions rather than the disbursements to do an end run around Citizens United. Those 3 things. I want every state to do Maine plus New Jersey plus California, and I think the electoral incentives radically change for politicians. They have to go out there and pitch that median voter.
I would just note that when we started the Disagree Better initiative, which is now which is ongoing. It's a 501c3. Please get on, watch the videos. We did some really cool things. We put governors of different parties together, and we filmed some videos of them talking about how they could disagree without hating each other. We did a whole bunch of polling around that, and I don't know if I can mention Stanford, but Stanford's policy lab had on this campus had a really interesting study using a video I did with my opponent in the 2020 gubernatorial election, where we got together and said, hey, we disagree about a lot of things, but we agree that we love Utah and we can disagree without hating each other. They studied that, and what they found is that those videos had a significant reduction in polarization towards that people felt towards each other. Specifically around thoughts of violence towards the other party. And what we also tried to show, Frank Luntz did some polling as well, to show that they were very popular. That if a Republican saw that video, their view of the Democrat improved, of that person. And so the reason I say that is, as much as I would like to convince politicians that they should do this because it's good for their souls and for our country, also, again, in a kind of a Machiavellian sense, I need to convince them that it also helps them win elections. And I think, hopefully my reelection and people like Congressman Auchincloss getting elected helps. The political industrial complex is incredibly cowardly. Like they just want to win elections, and if doing this stuff helps you win elections, people will start doing it. They'll start copying it. It will change that incentive structure. So again, please support candidates who are doing this the right way. Make that an issue like abortion or something else. Ask them at town halls, what are you going to do to help depolarize our country? Like make that an issue like any other issue in the country, and they'll start to respond to it.
I want to squeeze in like 2 more questions.
Hi, thanks so much for being with us today. My name is Brennan Chang. I'm a freshman at the college. From my perspective, a tremendous reason that people flock to social media was because they viewed the mainstream media as ineffective, and in particular, they viewed every major network but one to effectively endorse one political party. And now there seem to be some reforms, especially at CBS News, that have generated a lot of pushback. So I'm wondering if you think mainstream media is dead, or if it's not dead, or if we can still save it, if we should even try to.
I'm more concerned with local journalism than I am with the big national players. The decline in local journalism has been, over the last 15 years, it's been an epidemic. I mean, we have wiped out, I think 75% of rural counties to have no local journalism, and the stats aren't much better for suburbs or cities. Trust starts at the local level. It's half your tax dollars to start with, at least, is at the local level. And one of my bills would take the digital ad tax on these social media platforms and use it to fund tax credits for local journalism. Content neutral, but just tax credits for being a newspaper. Canada has done this program. It's actually worked pretty effectively. And I think if we can build back up an ecosystem of local reporting, City Hall, school committees, I think that the national outlets become healthier partly as a result of that.
Yeah, I would just add that I share your concern when it comes to the national media, and I think a lot of what you're seeing today is backlash to things that have happened before, and I think it's not helpful to kind of look at this in a vacuum, and that's absolutely what we've seen. So much of the rise of social media on the right, especially, came as a rejection to the national media, which was very skewed to the left, and I mean, this isn't just my opinion. It's pretty well documented that has happened, and yet, sadly, it's also opened the door to all kinds of misinformation. The one thing kind of about most media in general is at least there were some checks in the system where you actually had to have sources, and you had to have more than one source, and you had to have confirmation, and it prevented some of the kind of the worst abuses and the conspiracy theories that we're seeing all of the time now. And yes, like, I am much more concerned about local media. Like that's the whole ball game right there, and we're losing it, and that's why you're seeing this lack of trust. It also isn't so much that that the national media is as skewed now as it is incompetent. And again, I mean that because there's a lack of funding, and we don't have the pipelines that we used to have from local media. You kind of rise up through the system, and the very best reporters ended up getting to the state level and then the national level. Like, it's just not happening because those jobs don't exist anymore. And so it's a terrible ecosystem right now for journalism.
Thank you.
Final question.
Hi, I'm also a first year at the college. My name is Sophie. And I want to also go back to, Congressman, your discussion of Minnesota. And I wanted to ask to what extent you think polarization is just a product of people being able to see what's actually happening. And this kind of goes back to like Black Lives Matter movement and the murder of George Floyd. I think we saw a large amount of political polarization come out during that time as a result of the raw footage that we're able to consume from social media. So I'm just wondering what you think, how you reconcile kind of that positive aspect of media sharing with the harms of echo chambers and algorithms and things like that.
It's a really good question, because in some ways, one of the most profound tools we have against this regime is this thing, right? To be able to deflate their gaslighting by showing the world the reality on the ground. And that's why when I asked for a temperance movement, not for a ban, right? Like this, we're not getting rid of radio or TV or smartphones or social media apps. It's a question of how does society digest them so that they are healthy for us as opposed to being toxic. And I think what has happened in Minnesota has been a depolarizing moment because of the building up of a shared reality through all these different vantage points of the truth. And the times that we have seen that there has been that we've been further polarized is when the president tries to declare what the truth is. He tries to create his own weather, and the opposition is atomized and demoralized, and we aren't able to galvanize the country around a shared reality.
So yeah, look, I think you've cited a couple examples where a video went viral that everybody was able to see. There's in between those couple examples, there's a billion others I could give you where that was not the case, and it's the exact opposite. I'll give you one example around Charlie Kirk. After his tragic assassination, I talked to some people on different sides of the aisle, and I asked them what they were seeing, kind of in the wake of after Charlie Kirk, and it was honestly we could have been on different planets. Somebody saw all of these really positive, amazing interactions that he had with different people, very respectful, even defensive of some minority groups. And that's all they saw. Another person only saw kind of the most bitter interactions that were happening out there that would have portrayed him in a negative light for sure. And neither of them knew that the other things had ever even happened. Like they had no idea. And when I would suggest to them that, hey, maybe you should watch this thing, it may change your mind a little bit. It was even a refusal to even want to watch something that was different. And that's like, it's really hard to continue as a society when that's the norm out there, when we have a person and we see two totally different variations of that person, and there's no interaction at all. And so yes, again, we're not calling for a ban on social media. That's not what we're interested in, but we are interested in protecting our young people and then helping people become educated about the harms of social media and to realize that what you're seeing probably isn't reality, and it's going to be a lot less reality now with artificial intelligence.
Just one thing on that. The TikTok sale was a huge missed opportunity. I was a co-leader of the bill to force the divestment of TikTok, owned and controlled by the Chinese Communist Party, now allegedly, it's U.S. ownership. I think that's somewhat spurious. That was a bipartisan issue, and boy, that could have been done the right way, because what the governor is talking about this sort of puncturing the echo chambers and actually requiring your social graph to interlap with opposing point of views, that's not actually academic. Like Taiwan is doing that work. There are technological and product approaches to creating that algorithmic feed. And we could have done that with TikTok. We could have said, hey, we're gonna get this sold to Project Liberty or some of these groups that wanted to do something like this. Yeah. And they could have showed the world on the most popular media platform what something better could have been. And instead, it's like the Ellisons are gonna just flack it. It's just really, such a missed opportunity.
There's obviously, you guys have been doing such important work. There's a lot of work to do. Thank you for the commitment and the curiosity and the robust debate that you've modeled. These are muscles we're intent on building here. So we appreciate you joining us tonight.
Thank you. Thanks, everyone. Thank you.